So, you want to make your very first game? Here's how. Step 1 is to go to unity.com. That's right, we are using Unity today, because Unity is a pretty nice engine. You'll want to download the Unity Hub and make an account. Once you have opened Unity Hub, we're going to install the Unity editor, which we can do like this. And you should download the latest version that shows up here. You'll know which one's the latest version because it will say the date of when that version was released. And now we can create a new project from this menu. And wait a little bit for it to open up. Once the editor is opened, we're going to take a little tour of the place. This is the scene view. It's where you can select and move and interact with all the stuff in our game. And this here is the hierarchy. It is basically just a list of all the things that we have on our level. If we right click on our hierarchy, we are shown a list of things that we can add to our scene. Right now we're going to go to 3D and add a cube. Now that we have a cube, you can see that we can in fact move the cube around using these arrows. If we hit R on our keyboard, the arrows turn into blocks and we can now scale the cube, which we are going to do in order to make a platform. Alternatively, we can directly edit the size of our cube using the inspector, which you might have noticed. I'm going to use the inspector to make a 10x10 platform. But now I think it's about time we added some colour. So we're going to right click down here in our project window. It's going to bring up some options, but we want to go to create and then make a new material. We can make this whatever colour we want, and then we can drag it onto our cube to apply the material to it. As you can see, I've made mine a nice shade of orange. Of course, this isn't a game without a player, so like before, we're going to create a sphere. Now, if we head into the inspector while having our sphere selected, we can add a component. We're going to add a rigid body. This basically gives our player physics. Now, if we press play at the top here, we see the ball fall and hit our platform. Perfect. I've also made a new material like we did earlier in order to make our ball pink. Now we're going to do some programming. First thing we want to do is to install Visual Studio. Or not, Unity still works without it, but I highly recommend it. We're going to right click on our project window here and create a new folder and name it Scripts. We'll then double click on it to go inside and create a new C# script. This is where things get a little complicated. We're going to start by making a new variable. A variable is basically a thing that changes, so like a number or a word or something like that. We're going to declare our new variable like this. This here is the name of our variable and how we reference it in the code. This here is the type of variable. A float variable is a number basically. Specifically one that can have decimal points. This is a public variable, which means I can edit it from the inspector. There's also private ones, which can't be edited from the inspector, and some people write their variables like this. What's the difference? I don't really know, but it's not important right now. Now we're going to declare a rigid body variable, which if you remember is the thing that we added to our player to give him physics. The next step is to actually give this variable a value. We're going to type this statement inside of the start function. What this is going to do is it's going to find our rigid body in our player automatically and make it this value. So then we can interact with the player in the code. We're going to replace the update function with the fixed update function because the latter happens a set number of times per second, which is better when we're working with physics. Now copy this line of code. This basically gets the player's rigid body and edits the velocity variable. The velocity variable is a vector 3, which is represented by x for length, y for height, and z for width. When we edit or make a new vector 3 value in code, we give it 3 values in that order, separated by commas. On the x and z axis, I've added input.getAxis. This gets an input from the computer and will tell us which direction it's going in. The horizontal axis represents the left and right, so A and D on the keyboard, or left and right on a joystick that you have in a controller. The vertical axis is W and S, as well as up and down on a joystick. This code is getting our input, timesing it by our speed variable, and adding it to our velocity value in our rigid body. Now let's save this script, add it to our player, and hit play. We can now control our player, but it's way too fast. We can fix this by going back to our script. We're increasing the player's velocity like 50 times a second. So we're going to limit our speed using an if statement. First thing we're going to do is make a new variable that's going to represent our maximum speed, so we can change it in the inspector. Now we're going to write an if statement like this. How this works is that whenever the thing in the brackets is true, the function below gets executed. So in my example here, as long as 1 + 1 = 2, the code will do something every time the if statement is called. So what we are going to do is write this. This gets the velocity variable and checks the magnitude, which basically looks at how big the vector 3 value is using Pythagoras theorem. We are now comparing it to our maximum speed variable and executing the function in the curly brackets, only when we are below our maximum speed. Does that make sense? Because we're going to copy this line into the if statement and delete the original, so we can only accelerate if we aren't already at our maximum speed. Now when we play, the player can move perfectly, but we have a problem. When we fall off the platform, nothing happens. We just keep falling and falling forever. So we're going to make a new cube. We're going to now scale the cube up to make it really big using the inspector. This is going to be lava that will kill the player if we fall into it. We're going to make a new material for the lava, and I'm going to make mine red. Now we're going to select our lava and scroll right to the top where we can see tags. I'm going to click on this and then create a new tag, which we are going to name death in all caps. Now we're going to reselect our lava and give it the tag that we just made. Now it's time to write more code. We're going to declare a string variable. A string is just text, which could be words, numbers, symbols, or combinations of all three. We're going to name this string variable death tag. Now what we want to do is want to delete the start and update functions, and in their place write down this mouthful. The onCollisionEnter function calls every time the object in question collides with something. This little cookie in the brackets is a variable that represents whatever hit the object. So if our player had the script, a collision variable you see here would be the lava. But we want to check if we're actually hitting the lava, so we're going to make a new if statement that checks if the other object has the same tag as the death tag variable, and if so, we restart the level. In order to restart the level, we need to go right to the top and write using unityengine.sceneManagement. This imports a bunch of things that we actually need to interact with the levels in our game. Now we want to call this function. This goes into the scene manager we imported and calls the loadScene function, which will load a level, or a scene as they're called in Unity. We then use this function to get the scene that we're currently in, and now when we save, add the script to our player and make sure the death tag variable is death in all caps like we wrote earlier, we can hit play and fall into the lava and the level restarts. We're making good progress now, but we still have a few more things to do. You may have noticed that the camera doesn't follow the player around. We can fix this by making an empty game object and setting its location to 0, and then drag our camera inside of it. Now when we move the game object, the camera moves with it. To make it follow our player, we just need to make a really simple script. We declare a variable to represent the transform component of our target, and then in the update function, we make it so that our current location is the same as the player's, which is written like this. Now we add the script to our game object. Don't forget to do this. And now the camera follows the player around. From here we can just take the time to build a cool level for us to play using the transform tools. Remember, you hit W to move things, E to rotate things, and R to scale them. You get bonus points if you make new cubes and give them a death tag to make them extra dangerous. But now you're wondering, what if there was an end to this? Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to make a new cube and make a new material to make the cube black. The idea is that touching the cube will take us to the next level. The first step is to select our player. As you can see, Unity by default gives us a tag called player, so we'll just use that. Now make a new script and more or less copy down our death script, but with some minor changes. First off, we need an extra string variable to tell us which level to load. As well as this, we need to replace the getActiveScene function with our variable. Now it's as simple as putting the script into the cube and making a new level, which we will call level 2. We will also put this name into the cube in the inspector, and also change the tag variable to be player. From here we just copy the core components from our first level and paste them into the second one. Now we make a new level. One final problem, if we beat our first level, instead of being taken to the next one, we get this error. We can fix this by going to the build settings. Here we can add the scenes into our game by simply dragging them in. Remember, put your first level at the top, because that's the first one you'll see when you open the game. Now when we play and beat the first level, we get taken to the next one. Congratulations, you have now created your very first, very basic game. To celebrate the fruits of your labour, go back to the build settings and hit build. Pick an empty folder somewhere and hit enter. After a little bit of baking, you now have a folder containing your very first game. Thank you for watching and subscribing and liking the video. This is pretty different to stuff I usually do, but hey, if this video gets like 50 likes, I'll make a part 2. Maybe make this a series. But I'll see you in another 2 weeks.